Hi. I thought I would take a few minutes today and just go over the exam questions, talk about what I'm expecting in the way of answers to each of these questions, and to kind of break down these questions for you, just so you know what I'm looking for. The first thing I want to say is please note there are 5 points assessed to each of these questions. That means each one represents 5% of your final grade. So, that said, 3-sentence answers, which I've seen in previous semesters, and don't worry, you're not in trouble. But I've seen this happen in previous semesters, and, well, there's just not enough there to warrant a passing grade for the question, right? So when I ask you to briefly explain an idea or a concept or an argument, what I'm looking for is it's sort of a layout of the argument and then a commentary on the argument as well. So just presenting the position, right, is not going to be enough in these questions. The other thing I thought I would say about these questions is that you've got to be sure that you're answering them completely. And a number of them, I'm asking you to do 2, maybe 3 things. Right? So make sure that you are answering the question completely, right? And read the question quite carefully. Each one of these comes either from the textbook or from one of our lecture discussions and isolates either a key concept or an argument and asks you to do something with that argument. And so what I'm going to do, I've printed a copy of your exam, is go over each of the questions just to be good and sure that you know what I'm asking for, and that way we avoid any unpleasant surprises when the grades come back. Okay? So, you've noticed on these questions that there are, well, a total of 6 of them. That's 3 on Socrates and then 3 on Plato. And what I'm doing here with each of these questions is kind of spot checking your understanding of the arguments that we've seen, right? And in order to properly do that, I've got to ask you to, in a sense, do something with the information so that it's not just sort of passive learning, right? So in the first one, well, it's there are 2 questions that are sort of similar, but nonetheless, the first question and the 6th question ask you to encounter and discuss Heraclitus and Parmenides' position. Now, where you'll find that information is on the background pre-Socratics lecture that I posted right at the beginning of the semester. The first question reads, both Socrates and Plato are in an intellectual climate in which they have to meet the contradiction between Heraclitus and Parmenides' positions. Discuss how Socrates' position is able to overcome this contradiction. Now, what I would do if I were going to answer this question is first lay out Heraclitus' position, then lay out Parmenides' position, and then discuss Socrates in terms of that. Now, I'm not testing you on Heraclitus or Parmenides, but this background knowledge is something you need in order to make sense of Socrates' position, why he's making the sorts of arguments that he's making, etc. Right? So first, Heraclitus, right, who's the empiricist, who tries to generalize a simple principle from all of the sense data he's got, and everything that we encounter with our senses, it changes. There's multiplicity, there's flux, but this change makes a certain kind of rational sense to us. Heraclitus, the rationalist, approaches it from a different angle, using reason and propositional logic alone. What he does is he reasons about being. Being is simply that which is, right? This has being. That simply means it exists, right? I'm a human being. You're a human being. We exist, right, as human kinds of creatures. So if we are talking about being, we simply mean it exists, right? But what Parmenides realizes is that the idea of nothingness, non-being, doesn't make any sense. But in order to explain change, multiplicity, and flux, we've got to explain how things become not what they were, but something new. In a sense, we use this unintelligible concept of nothingness. So, right? Heraclitus and Parmenides disagree about change, multiplicity, and flux, and as I gave you on that lecture, right, the contradiction between the two positions, both being sound arguments, led the Greeks to believe that maybe we cannot know the truth. Now, Socrates, unlike the sophists, approaches this question claiming that perhaps we can't know the truth, but we can still do something with the truth. So in answering this question, what you would do is lay out Heraclitus' position as I just did, Parmenides' position as I just did, and talk about Socrates' sort of end run around these two positions, right? He comes up with a positive position in the absence of this knowledge, right? So that's what I'm asking you to do in the first question. The second one reads, we discussed in class a conception of Socrates' ethical position stemming from the nature of his wisdom, which we discussed in terms of intellectual integrity, or what I called on the video critical authenticity. Right? Briefly explain this conception. Well, I've given you several cues in this question. In class, we discussed Socrates' ethical position. How is Socrates able to make an ought claim? Right? But then I tell you it's stemming from the nature of his wisdom. So, first thing you should do is tell me why Socrates is the wisest man in Athens, and then discuss the ethical position that arises from the nature of his wisdom. So it's his epistemology that begets his ethics. Right? So, that question, laid out in that way, should be no problem to you. It was the central idea within that lecture. Question number 3 has to do with the gadfly argument. Socrates discusses the social purpose of his position by comparing himself to a gadfly. Discuss this argument and why Socrates would find this element of moral reasoning absolutely essential for functioning democracy. So, lay out the argument. Right? Secondly, right, how is this argument politically important? Right? So, I'm asking you again to do two things in that question. Right? So it's like I say, in questions 1, 2, and 3 I've just gone over, just basically an anatomy of the sort of answer, right, that you should be looking for. Right? Now, it's as a rule of thumb with these questions, what you're looking for is 3 points explained. Right? Obviously, in that last one, I'm asking you to do 2 things. Right? Present the argument and link it to the idea of a functioning democracy. Right? In the lecture, I gave you all sorts of examples to pull on there. Right? So, again, just be really sure that you're answering the questions completely and think them through. Right? In each of these questions, I point to specific arguments that you should be treating. Right? So, again, right, 5 points per question, a couple of sentences won't do it. Right? Now, another thing I want to say about these questions is that it's as we go on in this course, I'm probably going to start asking you comparative questions. Right? So it'll be 2 of the first figure, 2 of the second figure, and then a compare and contrast kind of question. Right? Those you'll have to think through because that triples, not just doubles, but triples your work. You have to present one position, you have to present the other position, and then third, you have to present the comparison between the 2 positions. Right? So as we go on in this class, what you'll find is that these questions become slightly more difficult, and this is as it should be. Right? As you learn more, right, you're required to demonstrate a little bit more of an understanding. So the point of these questions is to, in a sense, show me what you know. Right? Now, one great way to do this is by providing an example, but I'll caution you on examples. Right? I use a lot of examples when I lecture, but in a lot of cases, students give me the example, but they don't show me how it's an example of what they're exemplifying. Right? So what you need to be doing is being clear about what your example is exemplifying.